The blood on Tessa Brennan's hands had dried brown by the time she realized she had to run, and the only direction that offered salvation was west through the Owyhee Desert, where nothing lived except rattlesnakes and regret. She clutched the leather pouch containing every dollar she had saved from 3 years of cooking at the boarding house, her heart hammering against her ribs as she heard men shouting her name through the streets of Twin Falls, Idaho, their voices sharp with accusation and fury. The year was 1882, and women who defended themselves against violent men rarely found justice in courtrooms, only nooses. Tessa had killed Marcus Crenshaw in the storage room behind the kitchen when he cornered her with whiskey on his breath and violence in his eyes. And though the knife had found his throat in desperate self-defense, she knew no jury would believe a woman's word against the reputation of a dead man whose father owned half the county. She ran through the back alleys as twilight painted the sky purple, her sturdy leather boots pounding against the packed earth, her dark hair coming loose from its braid. 23 years old and suddenly a fugitive, she had no family to shelter her, no husband to provide alibis, nothing except the clothes on her back and the survival instinct that had carried her through an orphan childhood. The desert stretched before her like an ocean of sage and sand, and she walked into it as the last light died, guided only by stars and the desperate hope that somewhere beyond this wasteland lay a town where nobody knew her face. She had packed no food, no water, nothing except what she could carry in her haste, and as the night cold seeped through her cotton dress, she understood that she had traded one death for another, only this one would be slower. The first day taught her the meaning of thirst. The sun rose like a punishment, turning the desert into a furnace, and Tessa wrapped her shawl around her head to keep from burning. She walked west, always west, her boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. The leather was good quality, sturdy things she had saved months to purchase, and they protected her feet from the scorching ground and the thorns that grew everywhere. By afternoon, her tongue had swollen in her mouth, and she began to understand why men spoke of the desert with such fear. She found a barrel cactus before sunset and cut into it with her small kitchen knife, sucking the bitter moisture from its flesh. It bought her another day. The second night, she heard coyotes singing to the moon and pressed herself against a boulder, too frightened to sleep. Her feet had begun to blister despite the boots, and hunger gnawed at her belly like a living thing. On the third day, she saw the wagon tracks. They cut across the desert floor heading southwest, and she followed them because they represented human passage, the possibility of water, the chance of survival. Her lips had cracked and bled, and she had long since stopped sweating. The sun beat down without mercy, and she stumbled more than walked, her vision blurring at the edges. That afternoon she saw the snake. It was a diamondback, thick as her forearm, coiled in the shade of a creosote bush directly in her path. Tessa froze, her heart lurching, but the snake merely watched her with ancient eyes before sliding away into the rocks. She sank to her knees, shaking, and realized she was crying, though no tears came. She had to find water soon or die. The wagon tracks led her to a dry creek bed where cottonwoods stood like sentinels, their roots reaching deep for moisture she could not access. She dug in the sand with her hands until her fingers bled, but found nothing. As the fourth sunset approached, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of the fire she imagined hell to be, Tessa removed her boots. Her feet were a mass of blisters, the skin rubbed raw in places, but the boots themselves were intact, valuable, the kind of thing that could be traded. She had seen wagon tracks, which meant she would find travelers eventually, and those travelers might have water. Her boots could buy her survival. She tore strips from her petticoat and wrapped her feet, then carried the boots as she walked, each step on the desert floor an agony even through the cloth. The night brought cold that made her teeth chatter, and she kept walking because stopping meant dying. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, and she thought of her mother, dead these 15 years, and hoped there was mercy somewhere in the universe, even if she had not found it yet. Dawn of the 5th day found her crawling. She could no longer stand, could no longer remember why she was here, knew only that forward motion was life and stillness was death. The sun rose again, and she closed her eyes against it, her lips too swollen to form prayers. That was when she heard the horse. Hoofbeats in the sand, coming closer, and she managed to lift her head enough to see the rider. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a brown hat pulled low against the sun, and he dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, dropping to his knees beside her with canteen already in hand. "Easy," he said, his voice rough but gentle as he lifted her head, tipping water against her lips. "Small sips or you will be sick." The water was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. She gulped it desperately, and he pulled it away, waiting, then offered it again. His face swam in her vision, weathered and lean, with pale blue eyes that studied her with concern and curiosity mixed together. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" he asked. Tessa tried to answer, but her throat would not work properly. She managed only a croak, and he shook his head, pulling a dampened cloth from his saddlebag to wipe her face. "Never mind. Questions can wait. Can you ride?" She shook her head. Her legs would not support her, and her wrapped feet throbbed with each heartbeat. He looked at her feet, then at the boots she still clutched against her chest, and something like understanding crossed his features. "Vincent Porter," he said, introducing himself. "I am a horse trader heading to Silver City with 3 Mustangs. You are lucky I decided to take the southern route." She tried again to speak, managed only his name. "Vincent, and you are Tessa." It came out as barely a whisper. "Tessa Brennan." He nodded as though this explained everything, though it explained nothing. "Well, Miss Brennan, I am going to put you on my horse and we are going to get you somewhere safe. The question is where. Twin Falls is the closest town, about 5 miles northeast." "No." The word tore from her throat with such force that she started coughing. "Not Twin Falls, please." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly, reading the fear in her face, the desperation in her voice. He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Silver City is 70 miles southwest. There is a trading post about 30 miles south, run by a Shoshone family who will not ask questions." "Can you hold on that long?" She nodded, though she had no idea if it was true. He lifted her with surprising gentleness, settling her across his saddle before mounting behind her. His arm came around her waist to steady her, and she leaned back against his chest, too exhausted to care about propriety. The horse began to walk, and each step jarred her battered body, but she was off the ground, out of the sun, and there was water when she needed it. "What happened to your feet?" Vincent asked after a while. "Blisters. I wrapped them, but I had to take off my boots." "Had to?" She clutched the boots tighter. "To trade. For water if I found anyone." He was quiet, processing this. "You walked into the Owyhee Desert in August with no water, planning to trade your boots for survival." "I had no choice." "Everyone has choices, Miss Brennan. Some are just worse than others." His tone was not unkind, merely observational. "What are you running from?" She stiffened in his arms, and he felt it. "You do not have to tell me," he added. "But I am taking you 30 miles from the nearest town, which means I am involved now, whether I plan to be or not. It would help to know if someone is going to shoot at me for helping you." Tessa closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten again. "I killed a man. In self-defense, but no one will believe me. His father is powerful and I am nobody, so I ran." Vincent was silent for several minutes, his arm steady around her waist as the horse plodded through the sage. "Did he deserve killing?" he asked finally. "Yes." No hesitation in her voice. "Then I reckon you did what needed doing." He shifted slightly in the saddle. "My mother was murdered by a man who thought he had the right to take what he wanted. I was 12, could not stop it, could not save her. The man walked free because he had money and we had nothing. So I understand something about justice and the lack of it." Tessa turned her head to look at him, seeing the old pain in his eyes, the understanding that came from shared experience. "I am sorry," she whispered. "So am I. But sorry does not change the past, only what we do next." He paused. "I will get you to the trading post, get those feet looked at, and then we figure out where you can go that is far enough away to be safe." "Agreed. Why would you help me?" Vincent looked out at the desert, at the vast emptiness that had nearly claimed her life. "Because someone should have helped my mother, and no one did. Because leaving you to die out here would make me the kind of man I despise. Because it is the right thing to do, and those chances do not come along as often as they should." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was risking too much, but the words would not come. Instead, she let herself lean against him, accepting his help because she had no other choice, and tried not to think about the fact that his kindness made her want to cry more than the desert ever had. They rode through the day, stopping frequently to let her drink, to rest in what little shade they could find. Vincent's 3 Mustangs followed on a lead rope, their hooves steady on the rocky ground. He told her about his work, how he caught wild horses and trained them enough to sell, how he had been doing this for 8 years since he was 21, how the freedom of it suited him better than farming or mining or any of the other ways men made their living in this territory. "You never wanted to settle down?" Tessa asked during one rest stop, her voice growing stronger as the water restored her. "Settling down requires a place worth settling in, and I have not found it yet." He glanced at her, something flickering in his expression. "What about you? What were you doing in Twin Falls before everything went wrong?" "Cooking at the boarding house. I have been on my own since I was 10 when my father died. Worked wherever they would hire me, saved what I could, hoped to open my own restaurant someday." She laughed bitterly. "That plan seems foolish now. Dreams are never foolish. They just sometimes take different roads than we expected." The sun began to descend, and Vincent urged the horse to a faster walk. "We need to make the trading post by nightfall. I do not want to camp out here with you in this condition." "I am slowing you down. You are barely alive. That is different than being slow." His arm tightened slightly around her waist, protective. "Besides, I chose to take you. That makes you my responsibility until I know you are safe." Something warm unfurled in Tessa's chest at those words, something she had not felt in a very long time. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. This man owed her nothing, had found her dying in the desert, and instead of leaving her or demanding payment, had simply decided to help. In her experience, men did not do such things without expecting something in return. But Vincent had asked for nothing, only offered water and transport and kindness. As twilight approached, the trading post appeared on the horizon, a collection of low buildings built from adobe and stone, smoke rising from a central fire. Vincent rode in slowly, calling out in a language Tessa did not understand, and a woman emerged from the largest building, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face lined with age and wisdom. She and Vincent spoke rapidly in what Tessa realized was Shoshone, the woman's eyes moving to study Tessa with sharp intelligence. Finally, she nodded and gestured toward the building. "This is Nakai," Vincent said, dismounting and then helping Tessa down with careful hands. "She runs the trading post with her son. She will tend to your feet and give you a place to rest. She does not speak much English, but her son Thomas does. He should be back from hunting soon." Nakai took Tessa's arm, supporting her weight as they moved inside. The interior was cool and dim, with woven blankets hanging on the walls and the smell of sage smoke in the air. She guided Tessa to a pallet near the fire and began unwrapping her feet with gentle efficiency, making soft, clicking sounds of disapproval when she saw the damage. Vincent crouched beside them, translating as Nakai examined the wounds. "She says the blisters are bad but will heal. No infection yet, which is lucky. She is going to make a poultice and wrap them properly. You need to stay off your feet for several days." "I cannot pay her," Tessa said quietly. Vincent pulled something from his pocket and pressed it into Nakai's hand, speaking in Shoshone again. The woman looked at him, then at Tessa, and nodded once before moving away to gather herbs and water. "What did you give her?" Tessa asked. "A silver dollar. More than enough for her help and your room for a few nights. I cannot let you pay for me. Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. You can repay me when your restaurant becomes famous." He said it lightly, trying to ease the guilt he could see in her face. Nakai returned with a basin of water and began cleaning Tessa's feet, the pain sharp enough to make her gasp. Vincent stayed beside her, his presence somehow steadying, and she found herself gripping his hand without meaning to. He did not pull away, just let her squeeze as hard as she needed while Nakai worked. By the time her feet were wrapped in clean cloth and covered with a paste that smelled of strange herbs, full darkness had fallen outside. A young man entered the trading post, carrying a brace of rabbits, and his eyes went immediately to the strangers by his mother's fire. "Thomas," Vincent said, standing to shake his hand. "It has been a while. Vincent Porter, I heard you were bringing horses through this season." Thomas was perhaps 25, with his mother's dark eyes and an easy smile. His gaze moved to Tessa. "And you bring other things as well, it seems. Found her in the desert. She needs a safe place to rest for a few days." Thomas looked at his mother, who spoke rapidly in Shoshone. He nodded slowly, his expression growing more serious. "My mother says she is running from something bad, says she can see the fear still in her eyes." "She is," Vincent confirmed. "And the less we all know about it, the safer everyone is. Understood?" Thomas moved to help his mother prepare the rabbits for cooking. "You are welcome to stay as long as you need, both of you." They ate together around the fire, the rabbits seasoned with wild herbs and roasted until the meat fell from the bones. Tessa had not realized how hungry she was until the food touched her tongue, and she ate until her stomach ached, washing it down with water flavored with mint. Nakai watched her with satisfaction, nodding approvingly when she finished. As the night deepened, Vincent stepped outside to tend to his horses and Thomas moved to sit beside Tessa. "Vincent is a good man," he said quietly. "Honest. You are lucky he found you." "I know," Tessa said. "I just wish I did not need finding. We all need finding sometimes. The trick is recognizing when someone worth knowing does the finding." He smiled slightly. "He has been coming through here for years, trading horses, bringing news from the settlements. Never once has he brought someone with him, so you must be special, or he must think so." Tessa felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "He just took pity on me, that is all. Maybe, or maybe he saw something worth saving." Thomas stood, stretching. "Either way, you are safe here. My mother's trading post is neutral ground. Even the cavalry leaves us alone, and the outlaws respect our hospitality. Rest, heal, and decide what comes next." Vincent returned as Thomas was banking the fire for the night. Nakai had already disappeared into her private quarters, leaving blankets for the guests. The interior of the trading post was divided by hanging textiles, creating small areas of privacy, and Thomas showed them to their separate spaces before bidding them good night. Tessa lay on the pallet, her feet throbbing despite the poultice, her body exhausted but her mind racing. She could hear Vincent settling in the space nearby, the rustle of blankets, the soft sound of his breathing. For the first time in 5 days she felt safe, and the relief of it was almost painful. "Vincent," she called softly. "Yes, thank you for everything. I know I already said it, but I need you to know I mean it." There was a pause, then his voice came through the darkness, warm and steady. "You would have done the same if you found someone dying in the desert." "I hope so. I like to think so, but I am not sure I would have been as brave." "You walked into the Owyhee Desert alone with nothing but boots you were willing to trade for water. Do not talk to me about bravery, Miss Brennan. You have more than enough." She smiled despite everything, curling on her side. "Desperation is not the same as bravery. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is braver." Another pause. "Sleep, Tessa. Tomorrow we figure out what happens next." She closed her eyes, listening to the night sounds of the desert beyond the adobe walls. And for the first time since she had driven a knife into Marcus Crenshaw's throat, she slept without dreaming of blood. Morning brought the smell of coffee and cornmeal cakes, and Tessa woke to find Nakai cooking over the fire while Thomas sat nearby repairing a bridle. Vincent was already outside. She could hear him talking to the horses in that low, patient voice he used. Her feet still hurt, but the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent ache, and when she sat up, she found a cup of water waiting beside her pallet. Nakai brought her food without speaking, but her eyes were kind, and she patted Tessa's shoulder in a gesture that transcended language. The cornmeal cakes were sweet with honey, and Tessa ate slowly, savoring each bite. Vincent came inside as she was finishing, his hat in his hands, his hair slightly mussed from the wind. "How are the feet?" he asked. "Better. Still hurt, but better." "Good. Because we need to talk about what happens next." He sat down across from her, his expression serious. "Twin Falls is 5 miles away, which means the posse looking for you, if there is one, is not far behind. They will check the trading posts, the towns, anywhere you might have run. You need to get farther away, and you need to do it soon." Tessa's stomach tightened. "I know, but I cannot walk like this, and I cannot ask you to take me any farther. You have already done too much. I am taking the horses to Silver City anyway. That is another 40 miles southwest, over the mountains. It is a mining town, plenty of work for someone who can cook, and nobody asks too many questions about where people came from. You could disappear there, start over. 40 miles through the mountains on feet that are barely healing." Vincent leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "Which is why I am going to carry you the last 10 miles if I have to, or as many miles as it takes. But we are not leaving you here where they can find you, and we are not letting you try to make it on your own. You almost died once already. I will not watch it happen again." Tessa stared at him, searching his face for the ulterior motive, the hidden expectation, but found only determination and something that looked almost like fear. Fear for her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, needing to understand. "I told you yesterday." "Because it is right. That is not enough of a reason to risk yourself." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands. "My mother died because no one would help her. Because everyone looked the other way, decided it was not their problem, let injustice happen because facing it was uncomfortable. I was 12 and powerless, but I am not 12 anymore, and I am not powerless. So when I find someone who needs help, someone running from the same kind of evil that killed her, I help. It is that simple and that complicated." Tessa felt tears sting her eyes. "And what if helping me gets you killed? What then?" "Then I die knowing I tried to do something good." "That is more than most people can say." He set his hat aside and reached across the space between them, taking her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. "I know you do not know me, Tessa. I know you have no reason to trust me beyond what I have done so far. But I am asking you to let me help you reach Silver City, to give you a chance at the life you deserve. After that, if you never want to see me again, I will understand. But at least let me get you somewhere safe first." She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers curled around hers with such careful strength, and felt something shift inside her chest. Trust, yes, but something more as well. Something that felt like the first green shoots of spring after a long winter, fragile and new and terrifying. "All right," she whispered. "All right, I will let you help me." His smile was like sunrise, breaking across his face with genuine relief and something warmer. "Good. We leave tomorrow morning early, before the heat sets in. Thomas says there is a trail through the mountains that will keep us away from the main roads, harder but safer. We will take it slow, and if your feet cannot handle it, I will put you on the horse and lead it on foot if I have to." "You are ridiculous," she said, but she was smiling despite the tears on her cheeks. "I have been called worse." They spent the day preparing for the journey. Thomas provided supplies, dried meat and cornmeal and coffee, and refilled Vincent's canteens from the trading posts well. Nakai changed the dressing on Tessa's feet and gave her a small pouch of the healing herbs, along with instructions delivered through Thomas's translation. Vincent checked his horses, trading one of the mustangs to Thomas for a gentler mare that would be easier for Tessa to ride. As the afternoon heat peaked, Tessa found herself sitting in the shade of the trading post's ramada, watching Vincent work with the horses. He moved with unconscious grace, his hands gentle but firm as he examined hooves and checked saddles, and she realized she was noticing things about him she had no business noticing. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached up to adjust a bridle. The small scar on his chin that suggested a past injury. The patience in his voice when he spoke to the animals, treating them like partners rather than property. Thomas sat down beside her, following her gaze. "He is handsome, is he not?" he said with a knowing smile. Tessa felt her cheeks flush. "I had not noticed. You are a terrible liar." Thomas chuckled. "It is all right. He looks at you the same way when you are not watching. He does not, he does." "I have known Vincent for 5 years, and I have never seen him bring anyone here, never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you are something precious he is afraid of breaking." Tessa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly uncomfortable. "He is just being kind. That is all." "Maybe. Or maybe sometimes kindness is how something deeper begins." Thomas stood, stretching. "Either way, you are lucky to have found each other, even if neither of you knows it yet." That night, they ate together again, the 4 of them around the fire, and Nakai told stories in Shoshone that Thomas translated into English. Tales of the desert, of coyote spirits and ancient magic, of a time before the white settlers came and changed everything. Vincent listened with respectful attention, asking questions that showed genuine interest, and Tessa found herself relaxing, laughing at the clever twists in the stories, forgetting for a few hours that she was a fugitive with blood on her hands. When Nakai finished her stories, she looked at Tessa with eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. She spoke in Shoshone, and Thomas translated carefully. "My mother says you carry great guilt for what you have done. She says guilt for protecting yourself is a burden you must set down, or it will poison everything you try to build. The man you killed chose his own path. You simply chose not to die on it with him. There is no shame in survival." Tessa felt tears slip down her cheeks, and Nakai reached out to cup her face with weathered hands, speaking again. She says you have a good heart, and good hearts are rare. Do not waste yours on regret. Use it to build something beautiful with the life you have been given." Thomas paused, then added quietly, "She also says the cowboy who found you has a good heart too, and two good hearts together can weather any storm." Tessa met Vincent's eyes across the fire and saw her own uncertainty reflected there, mixed with something that looked like hope. He smiled slightly, a private expression meant only for her, and she felt her heart skip in her chest. They set out before dawn, the air still cool and dark, stars fading into the approaching sunrise. Tessa wore her boots again, padding them with extra cloth to protect her healing feet, and Vincent helped her onto the mare with hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary at her waist. Thomas and Nakai stood in the doorway of the trading post, waving as they departed, and Tessa looked back once before they disappeared into the landscape, memorizing their kindness. The trail through the mountains was rougher than the desert had been, steep and rocky, winding between juniper and sage. Vincent led his two remaining mustangs on a rope while Tessa rode the mare, and he set a slow pace, stopping frequently to check on her. The sun rose hot and bright, but the mountains provided more shade than the open desert, and there were small streams where they could refill the canteens. By afternoon, Tessa's feet were screaming inside her boots, and she could not hide the pain from her face. Vincent noticed immediately, calling a halt beside a creek shaded by cottonwoods. "Let me see," he said, and she reluctantly removed her boots. The blisters had reopened in places, blood seeping through the bandages, and Vincent's jaw tightened. "You should have told me. We need to keep moving." "Not like this." He retrieved Nakai's poultice and fresh cloth from his saddlebag and knelt before her, unwrapping her feet with infinite care. "If these get infected, walking will be the least of your problems." She watched him work, this cowboy who had appeared in the desert, like an answer to a prayer. She had not known how to speak. His hands were gentle despite their roughness, and he focused on his task with complete attention, making sure every wound was clean before applying the medicine and rewrapping her feet. "Why are you not married?" she asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could think better of it. Vincent glanced up, surprised. "That is a strange question. You are kind, hardworking, not terrible to look at. Seems like some woman would have claimed you by now." He smiled at the backhanded compliment. "I move around too much." Not many women want to follow a horse trader through the territories, and the ones who have wanted to settle down wanted me to settle too, give up the work I love. Never found the right fit, I suppose. So you chose freedom over companionship. I chose not compromising on either." He finished tying off the bandage and sat back on his heels, looking at her seriously. "I always figured if I found someone who understood why I need the open spaces, why I need the work and the travel, someone who wanted to build a life that included those things instead of requiring me to give them up, then maybe I would marry. But that kind of woman is rare." "Maybe you are looking in the wrong places," Tessa said softly. "Maybe I am looking at her right now," Vincent replied, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Tessa's heart hammered in her chest. "You do not know me well enough to say that. I know you are brave. I know you fight for your own survival. I know you care enough about injustice to risk everything rather than let it stand. I know you have not complained once, even though I can see how much you are hurting." He moved closer, his voice dropping lower. "I know that every time you smile, something in my chest tightens, and when you look at me like you are looking at me right now, I forget what I was planning to say next. Vincent." His name was a whisper, a question, a prayer. He reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers grazing her cheek. "I am not saying I have all the answers, Tessa. I am not even sure I am asking the right questions yet. But I am saying that finding you in that desert felt like fate, and everything since then has felt like falling, and I am not sure I want to stop." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I killed a man less than a week ago. I am running for my life. I have nothing to offer you except trouble and danger. You are alive. That is not nothing, that is everything." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "And trouble I can handle, danger I can face. But leaving you behind, walking away and never knowing what became of you, watching you disappear into Silver City and losing you before I had the chance to really find you, that I cannot do. So I am asking, when we get to Silver City, when you are safe and starting over, would you let me stay? Not forever, not right away, just long enough to see if this feeling between us is real or just two people finding comfort in a desperate situation." Tessa opened her eyes, meeting his gaze, and saw nothing but honesty there, honest and vulnerable and terrifyingly sincere. "And if it is real, then what? Then we figure it out together. Build something that works for both of us, not just one or the other. Maybe I spend half my time trading horses and half my time helping you run that restaurant you want. Maybe you travel with me sometimes, and we make a life that includes open spaces and new places and each other. Maybe we are making this up as we go and hoping we do not break each other's hearts in the process." He smiled, crooked and hopeful. "But first you have to agree to try." She should say no. She should protect herself, protect him, keep her heart locked away where it could not be hurt or cause hurt to others. But looking at Vincent, at this man who had carried her out of the desert and refused to abandon her, who spoke of building a life instead of fitting into an existing one, who looked at her like she was worth saving, she found she could not. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will try." His smile was brilliant, and he leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. His lips met hers softly, carefully, a question and an answer all at once. The kiss was brief, chaste even, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body, chasing away the pain and fear and replacing them with something bright and new. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "Good. Now let us get you to Silver City so we can start figuring this out properly." They rode on, but something had shifted between them. A wall coming down, a bridge being built. Vincent rode closer now, their legs occasionally brushing when the trail narrowed, and every touch sent sparks through Tessa's skin. They talked as they traveled, sharing stories of their pasts, the small details that painted pictures of who they had been before they met each other in the desert. Tessa told him about growing up in an orphanage in San Francisco, about running away when she was 14, because the headmistress beat the children, and no one would stop her. She told him about traveling east, working in kitchens and laundries, learning to cook from a Chinese woman in Sacramento, who had treated her with more kindness than any blood relative ever had. She told him about the boarding house in Twin Falls, about saving every penny, about dreaming of something more than surviving day to day. Vincent told her about his mother, about her gentle hands and fierce love, about how she had taught him to treat animals with respect and people with kindness. He told her about the man who killed her, about watching him walk free, about the rage that had burned in his chest for years, until he finally realized that becoming bitter and violent would only mean that man had destroyed both of them. He told her about catching his first wild horse at 17, about the moment he realized this was what he was meant to do, about the freedom he found in the open territories, where the only rules were the ones you made for yourself. By nightfall, they had covered less than 20 miles, the mountains slowing their progress, but they found a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock to make camp. Vincent built a small fire and made coffee while Tessa sat with her feet elevated, trying to keep the swelling down. He heated water and cleaned her wounds again before they ate, his ministrations becoming a ritual between them. And when he finished, she caught his hand and held it, saying nothing, just needing the connection. They ate dried meat and cornmeal cakes reheated on flat stones beside the fire. And as darkness deepened around them, Vincent unrolled their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. But when Tessa lay down and started shivering, the mountain cold seeping through her thin blanket, he moved his bedroll closer without asking, lying down beside her and pulling his own blanket over both of them. "For warmth," he said quietly, "if you do not mind." "I do not mind," she whispered, and turned so her back was against his chest, his arm coming around her waist to hold her close. His body heat surrounded her, chasing away the chill, and she felt safer than she had in years, wrapped in the arms of this man who had saved her life and was now trying to save her heart as well. "Tessa," he murmured against her hair. "Yes, I am glad I found you, even if it brings trouble. Even if it complicates everything, I am glad." She laced her fingers through his where they rested against her stomach. "So am I." They fell asleep like that, tangled together beside the dying fire, and Tessa dreamed not of blood and violence but of open roads and new beginnings, of building something beautiful from the ashes of the life she had left behind. The next 2 days passed in a blur of mountain trails and whispered conversations, of Vincent's patient care for her feet and the growing certainty between them that this connection was real and worth fighting for. On the 3rd morning after leaving the trading post, they crested a ridge and saw Silver City spread out in the valley below, a collection of buildings clustered around mine entrances, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. "There it is," Vincent said, reining his horse beside hers. "New start. Fresh beginning." Tessa stared at the town, feeling a mix of hope and fear. What if they find me here too? What if I can never stop running? Then we run together. He reached over and took her hand. "But you are not alone anymore, Tessa. Whatever comes, we face it as partners." "Agreed." She squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his certainty. "Agreed." They rode down into Silver City as the sun climbed higher, drawing curious looks from the miners and merchants who lined the streets. It was a rough town, hastily built to service the silver mines, and everything had a temporary feel to it, as though one day everyone might wake up and move on to the next strike. But there were businesses, saloons and hotels and boarding houses, and where there were businesses, there was need for cooks. Vincent guided them to a stable at the edge of town, where he made arrangements to board his horses and sell the 2 mustangs he had brought to trade. The stable owner paid him in silver dollars that Vincent counted carefully before slipping into his pocket, and then he helped Tessa dismount, catching her when her feet buckled under her weight. "Easy," he murmured, steadying her. "You have been riding for days. It will take time to adjust." He kept his arm around her waist as they walked down the main street, supporting her weight, and stopped at a building with a hand-painted sign that read "Rooms to Let." The landlady was a broad woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that took in Tessa's battered appearance and Vincent's protective stance. "Need a room?" she asked. "2 rooms," Tessa said quickly, not wanting assumptions made about her character. "1 is fine," Vincent corrected gently. "I will sleep in the stable with my horses, but she needs a proper bed and a door that locks." The landlady's expression softened slightly. $2 a week, paid in advance. Meals are extra, but I serve breakfast and dinner to my tenants if they want it." Vincent counted out the money before Tessa could protest, and the landlady led them upstairs to a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the street. It was not much, but it was clean, and when Tessa sank onto the bed, she felt tears of relief prick her eyes. I am going to stable the horses and find work, Vincent said, crouching before her. You rest, Heel, and tomorrow we find you a job cooking. Sound good, Vincent? You have already spent so much on me. Consider it an investment in my future. He smiled, touching her cheek. Besides, once you are famous for your cooking, I plan to eat free for life. That will more than repay what I am spending now. You are incorrigible. I am practical. He stood, his expression growing more serious. Lock the door after I leave and do not open it for anyone except me. I will be back before dark. She nodded, and he left, his boots heavy on the stairs. Tessa locked the door as instructed, then limped to the washstand where she poured water from the pitcher and washed her face and hands, watching the brown water swirl in the basin. She looked like a disaster, her dress filthy and torn, her hair a tangled mess, her face sunburned and peeling. But she was alive and she was here, and she had Vincent Porter looking at her like she was something worth protecting. She fell asleep on top of the covers, exhausted, and woke to knocking on the door as the light through the window turned gold with evening. "Tessa, it is me," Vincent's voice called. She unlocked the door, and he entered carrying packages wrapped in brown paper. "I bought you some things," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "A dress, some undergarments, a hairbrush. I guessed at the sizes, so if they do not fit, we can exchange them. But I figured you could not look for work in what you are wearing now." Tessa stared at the packages, overwhelmed. "Vincent, you cannot keep spending money on me. I can and I will." He set the packages on the bed. "I sold both Mustangs for good prices. I have more than enough for now, and once we are both working, we will replenish what was spent. But you cannot start fresh if you look like you walked out of the desert, so consider this practical necessity, not charity." She picked up one package and unwrapped it, revealing a simple blue cotton dress, practical but pretty, with a pattern of small white flowers. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "I hoped you would like it. The woman at the mercantile seemed to think it would suit you." He cleared his throat. "I am going to step out while you wash up and change. There is a bathhouse down the street if you want a proper bath. I already paid for you to use it tonight. Just tell them you are the woman Vincent Porter paid for." "You are spending too much," she protested weakly. "I am spending exactly enough." He moved to the door, pausing to look back at her. "You deserve to feel human again, Tessa. Let me give you that much at least." After he left, she gathered the new clothes and made her way to the bathhouse, where the owner, a thin Chinese man, nodded when she gave Vincent's name and showed her to a private room with a copper tub. He filled it with hot water carried in buckets from the stove, and when he left, Tessa stripped off her filthy clothes and sank into the heat with a groan of pure pleasure. She scrubbed days of sweat and dirt and fear from her skin, washed her hair 3 times until it felt clean, and soaked until the water cooled. When she finally dressed in the new clothes Vincent had bought, she felt like a different person. The dress fit well enough, and the fresh undergarments were a luxury she had not realized she desperately needed. She brushed her hair until it shone, braided it back, and studied herself in the small mirror on the wall. She looked like a respectable woman now, not a fugitive or a killer. She looked like someone who might run a restaurant, who might build a life, who might be worthy of a cowboy who carried her out of the desert. Vincent was waiting outside the bathhouse, leaning against the wall, and when she emerged, he straightened, his eyes widening. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "I look clean," she corrected, but she was smiling. "That is not the same thing." "It is when you look like that." He offered his arm. "Come on. I found a restaurant that is hiring, and I told them you would come by tomorrow. But tonight, I am buying you a proper dinner, and we are celebrating not dying in the desert." They ate at a small restaurant that served steaks and potatoes, and Tessa tried not to cry at the taste of real food, cooked by someone else, eaten at a table with a man who looked at her like she mattered. Vincent told her about selling the horses, about the stable owner who had offered him occasional work breaking horses for miners who needed mounts, about his plans to stay in Silver City at least through the winter. "What about your freedom?" Tessa asked. "Your need for open spaces and new places?" "Silver City is new to me, and the mountains around here are about as open as spaces get." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Besides, I told you I would stay. I meant it. What if you get bored? Then we will figure it out. Maybe you come with me on some trips. Maybe we find a balance, but we cannot figure anything out if I leave before we have a chance to try." He paused. "Unless you want me to leave. If this is too much, too fast, just say so. I will make sure you are settled and safe, and then I will go. No hard feelings. No." The word came out fierce, surprising them both. "No, I do not want you to leave. I just do not want you to stay out of obligation and end up resenting me, Tessa." He stood and came around the table, crouching beside her chair so their eyes were level. "I am not staying out of obligation. I am staying because when I think about leaving, about riding away and never seeing you again, something in my chest hurts. I am staying because I want to know what it is like to wake up in the same town as you, to see you every day, to watch you build the life you deserve. I am staying because I am falling in love with you and I want to see where that goes." Her breath caught. "You cannot love me. We barely know each other." "I know enough. I know you are strong and scared and brave all at once. I know you make me want to be better, do more, build something instead of just drifting. I know that carrying you those last miles into Silver City felt like the most important thing I have ever done." He cupped her face with both hands. "So yes, maybe it is too soon to call it love. Maybe it is just the beginning of love. But it is real, Tessa, and it is worth staying for." She kissed him then, right there in the restaurant with other diners watching, not caring about propriety or reputation or anything except the need to show him that she felt it too. This terrifying, wonderful thing growing between them. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened, full of promise and hope and all the tomorrows they might build together. When they finally pulled apart, the restaurant owner was clearing his throat pointedly, and an old miner at the next table was grinning into his beer. Tessa laughed, breathless, and Vincent smiled against her hair. "So that is a yes," he murmured. "You want me to stay?" "Yes. God help me, yes, I want you to stay." They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and Vincent kissed her goodnight at the door to her room with a tenderness that made her ache. "Sleep well," he whispered. "Tomorrow we start building your future." "Our future," she corrected. His smile was brilliant. "Our future." The next morning, Tessa walked into the Silver City Hotel with her head held high and asked to speak to the owner about the cooking position. She was hired on the spot after she prepared a simple omelet that the owner declared the best he had ever tasted. And she started work that afternoon, standing at the stove in a kitchen that smelled of grease and coffee and possibility. Vincent found work at the stables breaking horses, and occasionally hiring out as a guide for miners who needed to travel between claims. The work was good, steady, and it kept him in town most days, which meant he could walk Tessa home from the hotel each evening, could share meals with her at the boarding house, could spend every possible moment learning the shape of her smiles and the sound of her laughter. Weeks passed, then months, and Silver City became home in a way nowhere else ever had for either of them. Tessa saved her wages religiously, adding to the leather pouch that had survived the desert, and Vincent did the same, and they began to talk seriously about opening a restaurant together, about what it might look like, what they might call it, how they could make it work. The fear that someone from Twin Falls would find her gradually faded as no one came, As her face healed from the sunburn and her feet recovered, and her hands grew strong again from kneading bread and chopping vegetables. She became known in Silver City simply as Tessa, the best cook at the hotel, and Vincent became known as the cowboy who could gentle any horse and who looked at Tessa like she hung the moon. On a cold November evening, 6 months after they had arrived in Silver City, Vincent came to her room at the boarding house with a small box in his hands and nervousness written across his face. "I have something to ask you," he said, and Tessa's heart began to pound because she knew what was coming and she wanted it with a fierceness that scared her. "Yes," she said before he could ask. He laughed, surprised. "You do not even know the question yet. You are going to ask me to marry you, and I am saying yes. I might have been asking something else entirely. Were you?" "No." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small garnet stone. "It is not much, but it is all I could afford right now. Later, when we have the restaurant going, I will buy you something better." "I do not want something better. I want this. I want you." She held out her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking slightly. "I love you, Tessa Brennan. I loved you when I found you dying in the desert. I loved you when I carried you those last miles. I love you now, and I will love you for every day we have left. Will you marry me?" "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her, long and deep, and when they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at once. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow, today, as soon as possible. I do not want to wait." "Neither do I." They were married 3 days later by a justice of the peace, in a simple ceremony with the boarding house landlady and the stable owner as witnesses. Tessa wore the blue dress with white flowers, and Vincent wore his best shirt and the hat he had cleaned specifically for the occasion. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her like they were the only 2 people in the world, and Tessa thought her heart might burst from happiness. They spent their wedding night in Tessa's small room at the boarding house, which was now their room, and Vincent made love to her with a gentleness and reverence that brought tears to her eyes. "I will spend every day trying to deserve you," he whispered against her skin. "You already do," she whispered back, and pulled him closer, memorizing the weight of him, the warmth, the absolute rightness of being his wife. Winter came to Silver City with snow that turned the mountains white and made the streets into mud. But Tessa and Vincent barely noticed, 2 wrapped up in each other and their plans for the future. They saved every penny they could, adding to the growing pile of money that would eventually become their restaurant. Tessa worked at the hotel, learning new recipes and techniques from the other cooks, while Vincent worked with horses and occasionally took jobs guiding prospectors through the mountain passes. In January, a year after Tessa had killed Marcus Crenshaw and run into the desert, she received word through a letter forwarded from the trading post that changed everything. Thomas had written to tell her that Marcus's father had died of a heart attack, and without his influence, the truth about his son's character had come to light. Other women had come forward, sharing their own stories of his violence, and the authorities in Twin Falls had quietly dropped the warrant for Tessa's arrest, acknowledging that she had acted in self-defense. She was free. Not running anymore, not hiding, just free. Tessa showed the letter to Vincent that evening, and he held her while she cried, releasing months of fear and guilt and tension all at once. "You can go back if you want," he said quietly. "Visit, reclaim your name, show them you survived." "I do not want to go back. Silver City is my home now." "Our home." She looked up at him, wiping her eyes. "Everything I need is here." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Then here is where we stay." In March, they found the perfect building for their restaurant, a small storefront on Main Street that had previously housed a mercantile that went out of business. It needed work, painting and repairs, and a complete overhaul of the kitchen area. But Vincent was handy with tools and Tessa had vision, and together they transformed it into something beautiful. They called it the Desert Rose, in honor of the journey that had brought them together. And when they opened in May, the line of customers stretched down the block. Tessa cooked with joy in her heart, creating dishes that combined everything she had learned over the years, while Vincent managed the dining room with easy charm, his presence putting customers at ease. The restaurant became the heart of Silver City, the place where miners celebrated strikes and families gathered for Sunday dinners, where travelers stopped to eat the best food between Sacramento and Denver. Tessa's reputation grew, and with it, their savings, and by their second anniversary, they had paid off the building and were discussing expansion. But more than the success of the restaurant, more than the money or the reputation, what mattered was the life they built together. Vincent still took occasional trips to catch horses in the mountains, and sometimes Tessa closed the restaurant for a week and went with him, learning to appreciate the open spaces that called to his soul. They found balance, gave and take, compromise and understanding, building something that honored who they each were while creating something new together. In the summer of 1884, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent over dinner at their own restaurant after the last customers had left and they sat alone at a corner table, and he stared at her with such wonder and joy that she started laughing. "A baby," he said, as though testing the words. "We are having a baby. We are. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as though she were made of glass. Terrified, thrilled, overwhelmed, grateful, all of those things at once, but mostly happy, so incredibly happy. Their daughter was born in March of 1885, a squalling, red-faced miracle they named Rose, after the desert that had tested them and the flower that bloomed despite impossible odds. Vincent held her with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, and Tessa watched her husband become a father and fell in love with him all over again. Rose grew into a wild child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she ran through the restaurant like she owned it, charming customers and stealing bites of food from the kitchen. Vincent taught her to ride almost before she could walk, and Tessa taught her to cook, and together they raised her with love and laughter, and the story of how they had met in the desert when both their lives were at their lowest points. More children followed. A son they named Thomas, after the man who had sheltered them at the trading post. Twin girls they named Grace and Hope, for the qualities that had sustained them through the hard times. Each child was loved fiercely, raised to understand that family was the foundation everything else was built upon, and that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions. The restaurant thrived, expanding into the building next door, and Tessa became known throughout the territory as the best cook in Idaho. Vincent continued working with horses, though now he did it for pleasure more than necessity, teaching his children to respect the animals and understand their nature. They prospered in ways neither had dreamed possible when they were younger and desperate, and they never forgot how lucky they were. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent took Tessa back into the desert, riding out to the place where he had found her. It was spring, and the desert was briefly green, covered in wildflowers that bloomed for a few short weeks before the heat returned. They stood at the spot, marked by a cairn of stones Vincent had built years earlier, and remembered. "I was dead when you found me," Tessa said quietly, "or close enough that it did not matter. You gave me my life back. You gave me purpose, Vincent replied, his arm around her waist. Before you, I was just drifting. After you, I knew what I was living for. Everything turned on that moment. One decision, you choosing to stop instead of ride past. I almost did not stop. I was in a hurry, wanted to make the trading post before dark. But something made me look closer, made me see the boots you were carrying. He paused. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? The running, the fear, the struggle? Tessa thought about it seriously, looking out at the desert that had almost claimed her life. No. Because all of it led me to you, to our children, to the life we have built. If I could go back and change things, prevent Marcus from attacking me, avoid killing him, I would not. Because I do not know if we would have found each other otherwise, and I cannot imagine a world where you are not mine. I am yours, he said, turning her to face him. For all the days I have left, I am yours. They made love there in the desert on a blanket spread across the sand, with the sun warm on their skin and the smell of sage surrounding them. It felt like closing a circle, reclaiming the place that had tested them and making it theirs in a new way. As the years passed and their children grew, Tessa and Vincent became fixtures of Silver City, the couple whose love story everyone knew, the restaurant owners who treated their employees like family and their customers like friends. They weathered hard times and good times together, facing each challenge as partners, and never once did either regret the choice they had made to build a life together. Rose grew up and married a miner with kind eyes and gentle hands, staying in Silver City and giving Tessa and Vincent their first grandchildren. Thomas became a horse trader like his father, traveling the territories, but always coming home to the restaurant and the family that waited for him. Grace and Hope were inseparable, opening a bakery next to the restaurant and filling the street with the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon. Vincent's hair turned silver, and Tessa's hands became gnarled with age, but they still walked together every evening after the restaurant closed. Hand in hand through the streets they had made their home. They still kissed like newlyweds and finished each other's sentences, and made each other laugh with inside jokes decades old. On a warm summer evening in 1912, 30 years after they had met in the desert, Tessa and Vincent sat on the porch of the house they had built behind the restaurant, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Vincent's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, and they were quiet in the comfortable way of people who no longer needed words to communicate. "I never thanked you properly," Tessa said suddenly. "For what?" "For carrying me those last 10 miles. For not leaving me in the desert. For building this life with me." Vincent kissed the top of her head, his lips gentle. "You carried me too in your own way, gave me a reason to stop drifting, a place to call home, a family to love, so we are even. I love you, Vincent Porter. I love you, Tessa Porter, for all the miles we have walked together and all the ones still ahead." They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, and thought about the strange paths that life took, the unexpected moments that changed everything. A woman running from death, a cowboy riding through the desert, a chance encounter that became a love story for the ages. Tessa had traded her boots to cross the desert, willing to sacrifice anything for survival. Vincent had carried her the last 10 miles, refusing to let her fall when she could not go on. And together, they had built something beautiful from desperation and kindness, a life filled with love and laughter and the kind of happiness that only comes from choosing each other every single day. Years later, when both had passed peacefully in their sleep, their children buried them side by side in the Silver City Cemetery, under a headstone that read, "Together they crossed the desert. Together they built a life. Together they remain." And beneath that, a simple line that captured everything. Love blooms in the harshest places. The Desert Rose restaurant continued for another generation before finally closing, but the story of Tessa and Vincent lived on, told and retold in Silver City and beyond. A reminder that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and that love, when it is real and true and fought for, can overcome any obstacle. The boots Tessa had carried through the desert were kept as a family heirloom, displayed in the restaurant for years as a symbol of sacrifice and survival. Vincent's first lasso hung beside them, representing the cowboy who had stopped to help when he could have ridden past. Together, they told a story that Silver City never forgot, the story of a woman who ran into the desert to escape death, and the cowboy who carried her to freedom and love. Their great-grandchildren still live in Idaho, some in Silver City, some scattered across the West, and they all know the story of how their family began. How Tessa Brennan killed a man who tried to hurt her and ran into the desert with nothing but boots she was willing to trade. How Vincent Porter found her dying and refused to leave her behind. How he carried her not just those last 10 miles, but through all the miles that followed, building a partnership that became legendary. And on warm summer evenings, when the wind blows through the mountains, and the desert blooms with unexpected flowers, people swear they can still feel the presence of that love, still sense the power of a connection that began in desperation and grew into something eternal. Because some love stories are not just about two people finding each other. They are about two people saving each other, choosing each other, building something from nothing, and creating a legacy that lasts far beyond their own lives. Tessa traded her boots to cross the desert. Vincent carried her the last 10 miles. But what they built together could not be measured in miles or boots or any physical thing. What they built was a love that changed everyone it touched, a family that spanned generations, and a story that reminded people that even in the harshest places, even when all seems lost, love can bloom and flourish and create miracles. The desert that had nearly killed Tessa became the foundation of her greatest joy. The cowboy who had almost ridden past became the love of her life. And together, they proved that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually the doorways to the best ones, if we are brave enough to walk through them and wise enough to hold onto the hands that reach out to help us. Their story ended not with tragedy or regret, but with contentment and peace, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured for 3 decades. They died knowing they had built something meaningful, something lasting, something beautiful from the ashes of Tessa's desperate flight and Vincent's moment of compassion. And in Silver City, Idaho, where the desert meets the mountains and the sky stretches forever, people still tell the story of the woman who traded her boots and the cowboy who carried her home. They tell it to their children and grandchildren, a reminder that love is not always easy or simple, but it is always worth fighting for. That sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. That kindness can change everything. That two broken people can heal each other and build something stronger than either could have created alone. The Desert Rose may be gone, the building repurposed for other businesses, but the legacy remains. In every act of kindness, every moment of choosing to help instead of walking past, every person who looks at impossible odds and decides to try anyway, Tessa and Vincent's story lives on. They crossed the desert together. They built a life together. They loved each other through every trial and triumph. And in doing so, they created something that death could not diminish and time could not erase. A love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, tempered by hardship, and polished into something that still shines bright after all these years. The end of their story was just the beginning of their legacy, and that legacy continues still, carried forward by descendants who know the value of perseverance, the power of love, and the importance of stopping to help when someone needs it, even when it would be easier to ride past. Because you never know when that moment of compassion might change two lives forever, creating ripples that spread across generations, touching countless others, and proving that even in the harshest deserts, love can bloom and flourish and create something truly beautiful.